Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
Angel Sanchez of Milwaukee is a Republican candidate in the 8th Assembly District. The primary is August 11th. Angel, welcome to WisconsinEye. And let me ask you, what do you consider the top campaign issue for you?
Well, for me personally, public safety is very, very important. Keeping property taxes down and generating revenue. With the public safety, I'm against any form of defunding any branch of law enforcement with respect to our city, our county, and even our state. With respect to the economic development and employment, obviously want more jobs, more livable paying jobs for the people of our neighborhood. And the last thing is I want to raise revenue by legalizing marijuana, both recreational and medicinal. We need the revenue. Currently, I believe we need basically what would be like if you will, a Hail Mary pass in football for our economy. With so many people and so many services that the city has to deliver, it's expensive. We need more money, and that's really the bottom line.
Okay, now you talked about law enforcement. The governor has introduced a 9-bill package that would ban chokeholds and ban no-knock warrants and set uniform training standards for those that want to be police officers. Any of those police reforms you could support, Angel?
I don't know that I wouldn't say yes and no to that. The problem is that law enforcement is completely.
Can you adjust your volume, Angel? I can't hear you.
Okay, you should hear me now.
Yeah.
Up until maybe the last couple of years, there's been a few incidents that perhaps, put the focus on law enforcement, but the law enforcement people throughout our country, by and large, are pretty much professional people, and they've been doing their job quite well for a very, very long time. So I know that right now there's a need to look at things differently and perhaps review things, and I'm all for that. I think it's a good discussion to have, but time will tell as far as what the next step really is. Already here in Milwaukee, a few years back, they decided to put cameras on police officers. And I mean, this is just a next step. And in 2 years, there will be a next step. And 2 years after that, there will be a next step and next step. And the type of people that our law enforcement officers are dealing with are quite honestly very dangerous people. And I don't think that it's a good idea to be handcuffing our police officers. They have to make decisions in a fraction of a second that, their life could be at stake.
Okay, understand. The pandemic is going to cause a drop-off in state tax collections. The governor has estimated maybe as much as $2 billion. If you're in the assembly, would you cut spending or would you raise taxes and fees to deal with that shortfall?
Well, let me just say this, that my entire life has been about living within my means, and I think the government needs to do so as well. Nationwide, I think many municipalities are dealing with pension obligations, quite frankly, that they cannot afford. The city of Milwaukee has already been downgraded. And let me say that property taxpayers, there are many people, senior citizens, people on fixed income, low income, disabled people, they cannot afford to pay any more. Throughout the state, there were many referendums, and those increases for the schools will come into effect next year. So that'll cause tax bills to go up. We have issues with some places being overassessed and underassessed when it comes to assessments. But I am for keeping taxes low. On the other hand, like I said before, I am also for generating revenue through the legalization of marijuana. and also looking at perhaps some other creative ways to come up with money needed. So,
okay. So you want to keep the spending caps and the limits on property tax levies. You want to keep those in place on schools and local governments, correct, Angel?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's the right thing to do. And when you look at metropolitan areas throughout our country comparable to Milwaukee, we rate right up there at the very top. And I think that, with the exception of Philadelphia, which has its own unique formula, and I think it's Bridgeport, Connecticut. But the average wage annual salary in Bridgeport, Connecticut is $150,000. So those are the two exceptions that are higher than us, whereas most people, I think, around in the Milwaukee area, the zip code that I live in, the average income is perhaps around $40,000.
Okay. You don't see any reason to give local governments any new sources of revenue to reduce their reliance on the property tax then? You don't want them to have the ability to levy a local option sales tax, right?
Yes, I'm not objecting to a sales tax. I think it might be needed, and I'm not objecting either to what many people have approached me to with respect to a gas tax for our roads. By and large, I'm against most taxes altogether, but when you look at the amount of money that would be compared to the high assessments, the high property taxes, the fees, the reinspection fees, all the other things that we're faced with, which includes 30% of tax delinquent properties in the city of Milwaukee who are either delinquent or behind, not paying at all their fair share, we have to absorb that. So we're already paying a lot, but again, it's about getting to the table and finding practical solutions to help facilitate and deal with these issues.
Now, you mentioned the gas tax. We haven't got a stable source of funding to pay for our highways. Would you consider raising the gas tax to stabilize funding for our highways? It's 30.9 cents a gallon, hasn't been raised in more than 10 years.
Yes, I think that, listen, this is, I work in the industry of building roads, and there's some parts of the state that have really gotten their fair share of roads. And there was the ironic part was that I think it was about 10 years ago, there was the push to get between the downtown and the zoo interchange here in Milwaukee to try to get something going there. And it was contested by the Democrats here in Milwaukee. And ironically, now the governor puts it on the table that he wants to do it. We need money. That's the bottom line. It's a big industry with a lot of people. And the bottom line is our roads. To give you an example, we do about 40 miles of roads here in the Milwaukee metropolitan area. That's between 3 road building companies annually. The city of Milwaukee has over 3,000 miles. You can see what a challenge it is. But yes, we need more money to keep fixing our roads.
Okay, let's talk about reapportionment, the process of drawing new district lines for congressional and legislative districts. The Constitution now says that the party in power should draw them, but the governor would like a People's Commission to draw the lines and then forward them to the legislature to enact. Do you support the People's Commission?
No, not necessarily. I think the way things have been done, listen, I've been involved in the redistricting, drawing the lines, the process several times in the past, and I've been to the neighborhood meetings where they have input, and it's been done well, and I don't think that there's a problem with it. A lot of people who are interested in participating show up, and everyone gets their opportunity to speak, so I think things are working well.
Okay, let's talk about the pandemic. It not only squeezes the revenues of state and local government, but it hurts our healthcare systems. We've all seen how much hospitals are in the front lines, both in Wisconsin nationally, of responding to the pandemic. If you're in the assembly voting on the next state budget, should hospitals get an even bigger priority than they may have been than the priority they are in the current budget? Do they need more?
Well, that's a good question. And again, it would be based upon review talking to people in the industry what they want to complete. But let's go back about 20 years and look at these hospitals that have become almost as big as universities. They were built in anticipation of all the baby boomers who are going to retire. So in theory, they were actually overbuilt back then in preparation for now the baby boomers. You fast forward 10 to 15 years after the baby boomers have gone through those hospitals, they'll be overbuilt facilities, and they'll probably, they'll be at a less occupancy is what I'm trying to say. So it's something to think about, but no one can argue that a lot of work hasn't been done. A lot of work's been done for the past 2 decades. So, it's something to really think about.
Do you think businesses that have followed all the CDC recommendations on COVID to protect their employers and customers, should they be immune from frivolous lawsuits?
What I think is that businesses are very intelligent people. I think every business has got a right to post all of the warnings and all of the recommendations that are mentioned by our health department. But it's really up to, I think that it's really up to the people in America, the private citizens, on whether or not they want to go to any business, whether that be a building supply store or a restaurant. It's hard to say where someone could contract something like COVID, but at the end of the day, I really think that trying to put more mandates and more mandates and more mandates, it's very difficult. Look what's happened to the business community across America. A lot of people were put out of business. Some businesses are gone for good. And so there's a lot of consequences to this. And let us also keep in mind that not all of the information that's come out from multiple entities is all true and correct. And the pandemic is also evolving. What we know today is not what we knew a month ago or 2 months ago. So, and who knows what it's going to be in a month from now. But I think we're better off today than we were back then. So your question about the businesses being responsible, I don't think you should. It's a fair thing to say that they should be liable for. How do you track where someone got ill? It's very impossible. I think it's very hard to do.
Okay. Since you work on highway projects, let me ask this question. When a school district or local government wants to authorize a public works project, should they be required to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses? There was a study that said in 2015, out-of-state companies got $72 million in public works project contracts. That doubled to $146 million by 2018. Should local governments have to give a preference to Wisconsin companies? Angel?
I think it sounds good to give preference, and I'm all for giving preference to companies that are from Wisconsin to bid on Wisconsin work. But the reality is this: in this industry, most of the people who work in this industry, I'll give you an example, even where I work, we have people commuting over 100 miles each way in the morning and at night. A lot of the skill set of the people required to do this work, they come from far away. And the fact of the matter is, it's really, the real issue is that there's not enough young talent that's prepared to enter the field for lack of training, which is where I think that the educational system, the vocational public education system, needs to be reworked, because there is a lot of work out there in plumbing, in electric, in concrete, and welding. So in our industry, we have 18 companies that build roads. That's it for the whole state. And it's amazing. You could probably have 100 companies, but we just don't have them. That's all we have in the whole state, 18 companies. And so this is what happens when there's need to get work done. There's companies that bid from other states, neighboring states. We prefer to help Wisconsinites as much as we can, but sometimes, just like the Marquette interchange, the talent level that was needed for the Marquette interchange brought people in from all over the world. And right in the backyard of minorities, and they did participate in part. I was part of the advisory group, but in an ideal world, the numbers would have been much more significant.
Okay. Final question. Do you want to highlight differences between you and your primary opponent? Why are you the most qualified? I can't hear you. You need to adjust your audio. Thank you.
You can hear me now.
Yes, sir.
As alderman, in truth, I live in Walker's Point, and back then the tumbleweeds used to go through our most economic developed area, the Walker's Point area. Tumbleweeds used to blow across the road. But when I took office back in 2004, we did $300 million of economic development. That's a lot to be said. Other parts of our neighborhood had boarded up storefronts. We dealt with that. We dealt with an area of healthcare. We dealt with diabetes. We dealt with prenatal care, making sure that people were getting the services that they needed to get. We promoted education, and we talked about the importance of going to school. On a personal note, I've spent my entire life working in the city of Milwaukee, but also investing. I have 9 different houses in the city of Milwaukee, which shows my commitment to the city. Some of my opponents don't even own a home. Number 2, with my businesses, all of them, the businesses have done great. I'm at the point where I can retire. So I understand the business sector. I understand the government sector. I understand the construction sector. And I'm a conservative. I'm not about spending more money. We're at a very pivotal point in America where our infrastructure is about 100 years old, and we cannot possibly keep funding everything that comes up. Why? Because I do not want to raise taxes, and the reason for that is because, quite frankly, people just can't afford it. There are a lot of tough decisions that will lie ahead in the future, and that is what I've been doing all my life, making very tough decisions. And I have proof that I've been very successful at that. So I'm a hardworking person, and I think that I'm always fighting for the little guy, and I'd ask people for their vote.
Angel Sanchez of Milwaukee is a Republican running in the 8th Assembly District. The primary is August 11th. Angel, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye. Thank you.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.